Hi, for this video what we're going to do is we're going to find the extrema again. We're going to look for the local maximum, local minimum, absolute minimum. And you could also have in your courses where it calls it a local max is also known as a relative max or min, and absolute max is also known as a global max or min. So for this one, let's start with the absolutes. So I'm going to look for the absolute max first. In this case, because my graph continues without end in both directions, there is no end to where this graph goes, there is no absolute maximum because my graph continues on to positive infinity. So there is no absolute highest point. As far as an absolute minimum goes, if we look here, this is the lowest point on our graph. So the lowest point on our graph at any point is -4. Nowhere else is there any point that goes below this. So we would have an absolute minimum at -4 when x equals +4. So you can either write it in this notation, or you can write it as we have when x is 4, our minimum is -4. So -4 is the lowest point on our graph that we go to. We do have some other maximum and minimum points. We have some turns in our graph. Okay, and if you remember from the definition of a local maximum is it's got to be in an interval. So if I look at this interval right here, and I just talk about an open interval, it doesn't have to have an end. It just has to be before the next turn. If we look at this in relationship to this interval, this is the maximum point. So the highest point that goes in that interval is 2. So the local maximum is going to be 2 when x equals 1. And again, we could put this f of 1 equals 2, and that would give me a local maximum. This one does have a local minimum. If we come to this point right here, we can see that in this interval, from here to here, we have an absolutely lowest point right here. So we have a lowest point of -1 when x equals -2, or we could say f of -2 equals -1, where -1 is our minimum point. Okay, this point and this point are both local because they're not the absolute highest, but this one is an absolute minimum, and we don't have an absolute maximum. As far as our domain and range go, domain, remember, is our lowest x point to our highest x point. So if we go across this graph, because it continues forever and ever in both directions, the domain for this is going to be -infinity to +infinity. There is no end. There is no beginning, no end to this graph. It starts from -infinity all the way to +infinity. The range, if you recall, the range is my y-coordinates. Well, with my y-coordinates, if I start down here, I don't hit anything on my y. So the first time I hit something on my y happens to be my absolute minimum. So my absolute minimum is the lowest point of my range. So I would look at the y-coordinate, which is -4, so that's the lowest point on my graph. And then it continues forever and ever to the positive end because it continues forever and ever upward, so I would go to +infinity. As always, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know.